Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Rocket Pod. Firstly, thank you all so much for your amazing support during our launch week. We've had some incredible messages, loads of support online, and we're very excited to release the rest of the series to you. So, my name is Harry, and of course, I'm joined today by James and Peter. And our guest for episode 2 is world record holder and adventurer Neil Laughton. I'm not going to give too much away because Neil joins us now. Good morning, Neil. How you doing?
Very well, Harry.
I wanted to kick off today's episode by going back a bit and talking about what you were like as a child, focusing on what your upbringing was like and understand if you always had this drive for adventure.
Well, that's the scary prospect, thinking back all those years. What was I like as a child? Probably troublesome. I have to admit to you, I was at one point expelled for extremely bad behaviour, essentially organising a rave at school, getting caught, and being flogged by the headmaster, and then promptly, in fact, it was 8 lashings of a cane, which was the maximum corporal punishment you could give in boarding school in those days, and then very promptly expelled for the rest of term. So, but I was given a second chance. They had me back, and I was quite entrepreneurial. Maybe they only had me back because I volunteered to run the sweet shop. The school sweet shop, and managed to turn a profit and do some more bad stuff like experiment with vodka making, but I got away with that and saw my school days out. I was always quite adventurous. I think my mother was very homely. My dad was a traveling wanderer. He was a Royal Navy officer, and probably I've got a split of DNA from either of them. But I remember my first expedition as a 13-year-old, a little bit younger than you, Harry, 2 or 3 day canoeing expedition in my local river. So yeah, that was my first, and obviously my passion developed into exploring, adventuring, and organising expeditions. So that's kind of what I was like. Brought up in, I went to school in Sussex and brought up in Somerset.
So you mentioned this DNA split. Now, would you say that your parents probably had quite a big influence on you growing up?
I think invariably that your parents have a huge influence in your development and your life, clearly. So yes, I think I took hopefully a bit of compassion and love from my mum, and the adventuring gene from my dad. And in fact, I think he was catalyst in the setting me up for my first aspirational goal, which was to join the Royal Marines. How did that work? And this wouldn't happen today, unfortunately. But as I mentioned, my dad was a captain in the Navy. He literally, it was organised. I picked my 2 best mates at school and said, we're going on an adventure. My dad sent a helicopter pilot from the aircraft carrier he was second in command of in Portsmouth Harbour, all the way to Sussex, landed the helicopter in the front of the school. Me and my 2 mates boarded with our sleeping bags, and we disappeared for 4 days at sea with the HMS Bulwark and 2,000 Royal Navy sailors. But being a commando carrier, the place was not full, but it was obviously had Royal Marines doing their daring things up and down ropes underneath helicopters floating above the deck, and they would go off for a mission for a few hours with their camouflage faces and rifles slung on their backs. And as a young 12-year-old, I've no idea what my 2 mates went off to do, probably banking, but I just fell in love with the concept of abseiling up and down, or down ropes from a helicopter onto a moving ship. I mean, boys' homemade adventure. And so I took it upon myself there and then to become a Royal Marine. 2 years in the Marines, trying my hand at a career. It didn't quite work out. I went off the rails slightly because Dad died of cancer, a difficult period. I had one of those, you'll be too young to have one of these, but an interview without coffee is where your commanding officer calls you in to the office and goes, Lieutenant Laughton, things aren't working out. Here's your P45, essentially. My mindset with Dad dying wasn't in the right place, and I was in no fit state to lead a troop of Marines. So I was dismissed. So a pretty tough life lesson to accept that kind of failure, having been my main aspirational goal in life. But I'm sure we'll cover it. What makes somebody turn around in the face of adversity or obstacles or disappointment and failure, to go, okay, so the Marines don't want me, let's go for the SAS.
So that experience. So can you comment on the premise that sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can, I guess, reinvent yourself? Because sometimes it takes, I mean, that's, sincere condolences with the loss of your father at that time in your life. That must have been very difficult. But so it sounds like you had a rebirth from that tragedy at a young age. So can you talk a little bit about that and about your views on when you have a really tough time? Do you think it takes? Do you think you have to hit rock bottom before you can kind of get yourself out of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think you have to, James. I think sometimes you hear these stories of amazing entrepreneurs, migrants and immigrants who come from difficult parts of the world to this country or America or anywhere else in so-called first world. And because they have an amazing work ethic, because they're, if you like, their backs are to the wall, they've got nothing. There is nowhere to go other than death or, just entrepreneurial industry, get stuck in and make the best of what you've got. And it's that mindset that creates the success. Plenty of quotes out there about, getting up early, striking oil to be successful. But the main point is, if you are on rock bottom, there is either only two places you can go. And one of those options is not very pleasant. So it does force people to concentrate, to make good decisions and to, roll their sleeves up and work hard and make the best of what they've got. And often it's that mindset that takes people on to the next few levels.
So essentially it's a choice. So you either become a victim, you either choose to become a victim and go on a downward spiral, or you make a choice to, learn from your experiences and go up.
100%. And that's why I think, mindset and mental health and good routines and habits to keep yourself mentally, physically, psychologically, spiritually in the right shape in order to to push on.
That's really interesting. So you essentially, you set the bar even higher, it seems, to join the SAS. So, from a place of, perceived failure, you picked yourself up and then you set an even higher goal for yourself and then you smashed it by the sound of things. So can you talk to our listeners a little bit about your experience in the military? Obviously you were quite a wild individual at school and you had lots of fun and got into a bit of trouble. What did the military do for you, both in the Royal Marines and then joining the SAS?
Well, serving in the military, I think, is a great educational experience. First of all, it's a certain style of life and family, and it has plenty of advantages, a few disadvantages, but overall for me, it was a place where you could grow up very quickly, join the real world, and strike some amazing experiences, incredible friends, and one or two of the real core benefits for me, I think, are probably just that camaraderie, being able to think on your feet and not panic in a crisis, deal with what's in front of you sensibly, make good decisions. And probably the one thing above all else is just the fact that lifestyle of what you do in the military, particularly special forces, it's tough, and it just gives you a sense and experience right the way through, day in, day out, of being resilient.
Okay, that resilience thing, that's a really interesting subject. Can you talk about what resilience means to you? Obviously, you've pushed yourself both mentally and physically. I can imagine the training at the SAS is absolutely brutal. Can you talk to our listeners a little bit about resilience?
Resilience, when it comes down to it, is preparing your mind and body for the challenges ahead, and actually, being prepared. I mean, some of the principles of the founder of the Special Air Service Regiment, Colonel David Sterling, he said right from the start that people wanting to join his family, the SAS, need to have four key qualities. And the first that he was looking for was a never-ending pursuit of excellence, never accepting mediocrity, always pushing for the next level. So excellence and pursuit of excellence was top of his agenda. And the second was self-discipline, and that speaks for itself. It's not going off and having too many cigars, James, and ruining your mind and body. And so self-discipline, getting up early in the morning and doing your jobs and doing things that you say that you would do when you said that you would do them. The third thing was humility, which clearly I'm still working on. And the fourth is humor. And humor is a hugely important aspect. You'll have heard the expression of black humor in the military and police and ambulance service. When you're faced with difficult situations and scenarios and circumstances in life, actually what gets you through is that camaraderie and that black humor, and maintaining a sense of humor, not taking yourself or the situation too seriously and just coping with it. And so coming back to your question, resilience, it's about being prepared mentally, physically. It's about working together to ensure that you achieve what you're trying to achieve. And then most importantly, just never giving up, just keeping going, finding a route around the obstacle, the problem, or the difficulty.
I think that's a really good explanation of resilience. Those kind of four key principles: the pursuit of excellence, and obviously concluding it's just a case of never giving up. And actually, somebody mentioned to me quite a while back that when you're in pursuit of something, it's the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire, and it's actually finding what you really enjoy, what you really love, and just not giving up. And that comes back to those four principles. And I guess that leads me quite nicely onto my sort of next topic I wanted to discuss with you, Neil. And it's actually about your expeditions up Mount Everest. And I think it was in 1998 you climbed Mount Everest. And I remember listening to a documentary, and it said 8,000 meters. And whilst you were in the death zone, you were hit by the worst storm in 100 years. So please, could you share what that was like, and probably the thoughts that were going through your head?
So just to correct you slightly, I've organised and led 6 expeditions to Mount Everest, and it was actually the very first one in 1996, where I had a close climbing partner, a chap called Paul. We were a part of an international joint effort team, and when the mid-May disastrous storm, what the Tibetan government would claim to be the worst storm in 100 years, it was just something that came out. It was kind of expected, although it was really only the Americans had the technology. A newer storm was coming, and we had an inkling that a storm might be on its way, but we didn't know when. And there was a lot of politics, and unfortunately a lot of teams, including the Americans, were caught out. And in fact, they suffered the worst, because the storm came in very quickly. It was a category whatever big storm, 100-mile-an-hour winds, obviously being 8,000 meters, 26,000 feet up the world's highest mountain, as I was at the time, you can imagine it was pretty uncomfortable. And yes, we feared somewhat for our lives at that point, literally battling down the hatches. We had 2 missing climbers from our international team that we were kind of going out and looking for in the maelstrom. We had to get out in the middle of the night to tie the ropes down, stop our tent from blowing off the mountainside. And then all the while, through the night, the Americans and a couple of other teams were suffering, having made their summit bid, and were trying to make their way back to where we were at the final campsite, Camp 4, South Col, at the last campsite before the summit. And one day I shall write my book and explain to you the horrors of the 48 hours I spent there. But suffice to say, it was a sad scenario of I think 8 people losing their lives in a short space of time, from being blown off the mountain to dying of medical reasons, or just simply freezing to death. I spent two days and 2 nights, up there trying to survive, and then latterly to try and help people get off the mountain safely, including Beck Weathers, who's the postal worker who was tragically almost left. Well, he was left for dead 300 meters from our campsite, and his team doctor, I'd spoken to him in the morning, the second morning, and the first morning, and he had been to see him and had pronounced him unsavable. And you want a story of resilience and survival. The human instinct to survive is enormous. You just got to give it a chance. And this guy, having been survived through the night in the open, was in a pretty bad way with huge frostbite injuries. And you can't carry people at that altitude. You couldn't put a body on your shoulders and firemen's lift them down the mountain. It's just not really possible. And so his own team doctor, his colleague, his friend, just left him there, sadly, to pass away. But Beck, a light bulb went off in his head. He realised that nobody was coming to get him, including to my eternal not shame, because I didn't know any better. Went to help others, but he was left to die on his own, and he crawled into camp and was saved. He saved himself.
Wow, that's such a powerful sort of demonstration of resilience of what the human body, the human mind is capable of. I guess the realization that no one was coming back to save him. He managed to dig deep and save himself. But you also mentioned a second ago that there was a potential pre-warning, I think, of the storm. So did you know that there was a potential storm coming? Or I guess it's quite a long period of time, the expeditions. So is this something that you just took into account when you went up?
No, I mean, there's always during a 6 or 7 week Everest expeditions, there's always going to be bad weather. There's always going to be storms, and you just have to, do your best to avoid them. Plan your summit bids, etc. In between them, and sometimes you're lucky, and sometimes you're not. I mean, a few years ago, I took a team to attempt the world's highest black tie dinner party record, and that was all going really well until we were 21,000 feet up the mountain on the north side, and a wretched Category 8 earthquake struck, which was a horrendous disaster for the whole region. You just couldn't make it up. So yeah, of my various expeditions to Everest, I've managed to coincide with 2 or 3 of the worst disasters in 100 years of climbing Everest. So don't come on expedition with me, is the motto.
You did 6, didn't you? That's what you just said. 6. That's
yeah.
Awesome. So actually, another expedition I wanted to quickly touch on was the Timbuktu in a flying car. Firstly, before we get into that, can you just explain how on earth that expedition came about?
Yeah. Okay. So I climbed Everest actually in '98 with a young Bear Grylls, and became a good mate of mine. Was the best man at my wedding. We then went on and did a few different missions together, like jet skiing around mainland Britain for our summer holidays and stuff like that. We used to get up to a bit of mischief, flying, parachutes, paramotors, free falling and all that kind of stuff. And one day we were doing a mission back on Everest. I think my fourth or fifth expedition to Everest was with Bear and a chap called Gilo, to try and fly a motorized parachute to the height of Everest, which would smash the existing world record, and in so doing look to raise about £1 million or $1 million for Global Angels charity. So we were there. Bear smashed the record, and then we were having a cup of tea in the tent afterwards. And Gilo, who'd designed the engines for this incredible new world record for a paramotor, said to me, "Neil, I think I can now realize my boyhood dream of designing and building the world's first road legal flying car." And my jaw hit the floor. I was a pilot, fly planes, helicopters, parachutes, all sorts, and of course my ears pricked up. I took a swig of tea and literally found myself saying, how much to make a prototype? And he gave me a six-figure number. I had another swig of tea, swallowed hard, and reached across, shook his hand. No idea where I was going to get 150 grand from. But I shook his hand. I said, I'm going to be the owner of that flying car, and it's in my shed.
I'd like to take this moment to introduce to you our sponsor, Flexi, the must-have app to track and manage your subscriptions in one place. So most of us have multiple subscriptions nowadays for things like streaming services, gym memberships and food deliveries. These are great and take the hassle out of buying everyday products that we consume regularly, but it can be hard to keep track of them. That's where Flexi comes in handy, using super secure technology to connect your accounts to see all your subscriptions in a single dashboard, putting you in control of your spending. And what's more, Flexi's subscription marketplace allows you to discover new products you may love, all easy to pause, resume or cancel in a swipe or two. So give Flexi a try. It's free to download from the App Store, or check out their website at www.flexiapp.uk. That's FLEXY app.uk. Back to the podcast. I need to come have a look at that car. That sounds awesome. So this expedition started kicking off. So can you tell us like the process to I guess getting going with it? I mean, obviously you did a lot of test runs, that sort of thing. So can you kind of delve into a little bit more about the testing process and actually starting to do a few test runs and that sort of thing?
Sure, yeah, but I think what's probably, I'll phrase the answer, it's slightly more entrepreneurially for you and for your audience, because whilst it's an adventure story, it actually, the reason why I did an expedition with a road legal flying car was purely to help pay for the 150 grand, which I was facing, in quite short shrift. I had 8 months to find that sort of money out of the blue. And so, what do you do when you're faced with a tricky situation? I've committed to being the owner of a new prototype flying car, which incidentally, basically it's a sort of Mad Max-esque off-road independent suspension, off-road buggy. And Gilo, the engineer, put a propeller on the back, twisted the engine, did some very clever engineering stuff, and then it would literally fly under a massive paraglider's canopy, which of course, when you're not flying, just stuffs into a stuff sack, stick it in the boot, and off you drive down the road. Fill up with fuel at a petrol station, drive to Starbucks, and then when you feel like it, you then deploy the parachute in an airfield or somebody's garden, and then take off. Brilliant. So that was what I bought into. But faced with 150 grand, what do you do? I've got to raise this sort of money, and I simply thought, well, we've got to do an attractive expedition, which incidentally is going to cost another 150 grand to execute on. But the difference is that is something that sponsors can buy into. They can buy logo on the car. There's this great journey. It's going to be filmed by Channel 4. That's got value, and therefore I had within 5 or 6 months raised 100 grand of the 150, and I needed a little bit more. Had a bit of luck. A friend introduced me to a rich entrepreneur. I committed to taking her out for lunch in a 3-star Michelin restaurant somewhere near Oxford. It was a bit of a gamble, but it paid off. This entrepreneurial lady said to me, "I love your flying car project. Definitely want to get involved. Come and see me next Tuesday, 11 o'clock, and see how we can help you." So I went for the meeting. No time for coffee. She was straight in, sat down next to me in a meeting room, and said, "How much do you need?" 100 grand, I said. And she said, "Right, just nip round the corner, see my accountant, and he'll write you a check. Thanks very much." So Giles designed the world's first road legal flying car, and then during the course of 10 months, I organised 12 of us, and we did a journey from London to Timbuktu, sort of 10,000 kilometre, 8 countries, 3 minefields, 2 stretches of water, including the Straits of Gibraltar, which was quite hairy, and crossing the Sahara Desert, a great mission, perfect.
Sounds awesome. And didn't you actually get stopped by the police when you landed?
Well, yes. I don't know how long you've got. I basically, flying car, if you're designing a flying car and doing a 10,000 kilometer journey, you have to fly it across a body of water to make it, legit. So unfortunately, we didn't quite get the permissions from the UK government or the CAA for flying in the UK. And so I was unable to fly across the English Channel, which was a huge disappointment. And so the only other stretch of water we had to do on that journey was, of course, from Europe to Africa, Spain to North Africa, and that's the Straits of Gibraltar, 32 miles. And the first attempt was a disaster. I took off, and a wind shear gust took me, and I crash landed into the surf. Car nearly got lost in the incoming tide. We pulled it out, tried again the next day. The next day I took off. I was about 100 feet up, and there was a technical problem with the parachute, and it meant that the whole car was liable to implode. The canopy would collapse. I would drop like a stone, be knocked unconscious, and then drown. Not a great prospect. And so the Channel 4 film shows me literally unstrapping and ready to jump out into the sea. And then obviously the car would have crashed and gone to the bottom of the sea. But some weird aerodynamics happened as I prepared to jump out. I was literally hanging onto the side of the car, ready to jump, 100 foot up. Would have been the end of the expedition, end of the car, end of all my investments and all the rest of it. The balance twisted the car 180 degrees. It started going downwind, and the major aerodynamic problem kind of semi-fixed. I did an emergency landing, and whilst the cameras were still running, Gilo fixed the problem on the beach. I told him what he could see what it was. It was faulty brake lines, nearly causing us to collapse the canopy. And he fixed it there and then. I jumped back in for my third attempt, and it was a glorious flight right the way across the Straits of Gibraltar. But we had all sorts of other problems. So I had a team, half my team on the other side in North Africa. They'd identified a landing spot in a Sainsbury's car park or equivalent in North Africa, which 5 minutes before that third takeoff, I was radioed, and they said, abort, the army are starting an exercise in the car park. So I had no other option than to land in Ceuta heliport, which is a very short, the flying cars are characteristics of a fixed wing aircraft. It needs a decent landing space. But this heliport is very tight, narrow bit of car park, concrete landing space. And, I'd asked permission prior and they'd forbidden me. But I got into the air, made a kind of a one down, a pan call, which is one down from a mayday, and then switched the engine off, concentrated on landing illegally at the heliport, landed it, celebrated vigorously that I was still alive, and then probably got arrested.
Such a great outcome. From that, I actually wanted to touch on mindset a little bit, because you just said about how during, I think, your second test, you nearly had to jump out, which then caused it to veer around. But you then straight away got back in and completed the expedition. Could you talk about how key your mindset was to that sort of expedition? Also, what encouraged you to get back in and go, and where did you get that drive to have to finish what you sort of started?
I think the short answer is fear, probably. You're hugely driven by, we're humans, aren't we? And that for me was probably one of the most terrifying moments of my life. But I think, to refer back to one of your previous questions, I'd had a 20 years at this point experience of dealing with difficult situations, Everest and military and so forth. And actually you get attuned to coping in a crisis, coping better in a crisis or potential disaster situation. And whilst you acknowledge the fear, you acknowledge the danger that you're in, training, experience, age, and a little bit of that, natural response to fear kicks in. I told you about, the survival instincts of Beck Weathers just now. And for me at that moment, I had to make some really good decisions or I would die. And that kind of focuses your mind, doesn't it, somewhat? And so, whilst in the video, I don't know if you've seen it, there's the video on my website, but you will see, if you look into my eyes, there's a Channel 4 camera positioned into the car, and you could see me reacting to that potentially, life ending moment. And you can see the fear. You can absolutely see the fear in my eyes. But I think you can also see a kind of a determination to try at least to find a solution. And I'm trying different things to resolve the problem. Then I make the decision to leap out because I think it's beyond help, beyond saving. And then I realize that, something interesting is happening with the dynamics of it. So my brain is working. It's not frozen. It's not seized. I'm not in complete panic mode. I'm still thinking. I'm still making rational decisions. And I choose to get back into the pilot's seat and then navigate and make an emergency landing. And that takes cognitive skills, which is based on not panicking, making good decisions, and just adapting to the problems that face you at the time.
Yeah, that takes huge amount of discipline and the conditioning from your training, but it's preparedness, isn't it? So you could make those decisions in a crazy situation. I also really like the idea that, just for our listeners out there, starting with the end in mind, the end in mind was this flying car. You thought it was a good idea, and and you went for it without all that ambiguity, without actually knowing how you were going to raise the money, whether it was going to work. Obviously you had faith in your friend's engineering capability, and then to actually do it, and then facing these obstacles along the way, which was hugely inspiring. And I'm also interested in, obviously that's a kind of a crazy, mad adventure. The result of that after you've done it, can you talk about after the event, the people you met along the way, by doing something out of the ordinary, which is, well, it's certainly extraordinary. Not only did you complete your mission, but can you talk about the positive outfall, or what happened after? How did it propel you onto something else that you wouldn't have otherwise done if you hadn't done that?
Yeah, so it was an extraordinary mission. I think the thing that was striking me as you were asking the question is kind of the reasons why. I mean, yes, there are huge benefits for doing a challenging expedition, and you probably haven't got long enough for me to explain all the benefits of doing that, and just all the challenges, the obstacles, the excitement of bringing good people together in a team, and the privilege of leading them on a semi-dangerous mission for 6 weeks non-stop without a day off, and the amazing friendships you get from that, and as you say, the opportunities that come from it. But for me, one of the main reasons is fun. It's just taking life and grabbing the things that you enjoy within it, and pushing it as far as you dare.
That's a really nice answer. I like that. We could all do with a bit more fun. Let's face it. We could be on the hamster wheel running around, and
yeah, and I think people do. We all get wrapped up in responsibilities and financial constraints and logistical, and we're all in a COVID-19 nightmare right now. There's always an excuse. But actually, like the flying car story, reach across, shake the hand, do the deal, even though you haven't got all the answers, because life will never be perfect. And, I'm a great believer in gut instinct. What feels right, normally will be right. And if not, you tweak the plan, make it, don't be a diehard, make some changes and change and adapt.
Could you could you comment on your relationship with the present moment? Do you, the mindful being in the present, basically?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid I'm not really a sort of mindfulness guru, so I'm not sure quite how to answer that question. Do you want me to give you an example of of current mindset, or?
So I get a bit of. So I'll tell you what sparked it for me. So when you were in this dangerous situation, you were being very decisive. You were very much in the moment. You were very much aware of your surroundings. And I think something that I've personally struggled with is either thinking too far ahead in the future or having a foot dragged in the past. And it's something that I'm always trying to get better at, is actually being present. And it could be for relationships with my children. I have 3 daughters. Because being, so that whole mindfulness thing is kind of interesting to me. I just wondered how you operate, whether that's something that is important to you or whether you're always looking for the next thing.
Yeah, okay. So I understand your question now. Generally speaking, for me, the past is history. I think it's really important to learn from the past and what you've done or what other people have done. And great that, you said to me earlier about reading 10 pages of people's biographies or non-fiction books. Learning from the experience of others is great. And I certainly do my fair share of that. But generally speaking, I'm somebody who lives for the now and try whenever possible to enjoy the moment, to do the right things, and that stretches to a vision to the future. And I'm always amazed how people in my network just operate a week in advance. For me, that's just really short-sighted. That didn't mean that as a pun, actually, but you know what I mean. I'm operating 2-3 years in advance, thinking of long-term projects, extrapolating, things like I run the Penny Farthing Club. I've been doing that for a few years in London, and I'm now negotiating license agreements for other people I've taught who've bought into riding penny farthings and wanting to teach others in different parts of the country and possibly the world. And so I'm thinking 2 or 3 years in advance, the Penny Farthing Club will be represented in 50 countries and 30 cities in the UK, hopefully.
Definitely, I've seen you doing a lot of that. I have wanted to give it a go. It's just that just doing it sort of thing. But that also comes down.
I'm not sure you're tall enough, Harry.
I'll give it a go. Got to be done.
Yes, you will.
But one thing, that word "fun," I think that's something I did want to touch on, because that's such a great word to use, and I think people need to have more fun in everything they're doing. And I like your mindset in terms of, if you want to do something, you just do it. I remember when we met last time, you were building some sort of Japanese teepee in your garden. I can't remember. Do you remember that? What was that?
Yeah, I do know what that is. You nearly got there. It's a Mongolian yurt.
Okay, there you go. That sounds brilliant.
There you go. Exactly. Obviously, with the Penny Farthing Club, you set. I mean, you did the no hands 3 world records in one hit. But one thing that you said before is it's not so much the world record; it's about world firsts. Now, why is that important to you? Why have you always had that mindset to get that world first?
I suppose I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I mean, yes, I do have some records and some Guinness World Records. But not generally I'd like to think, coming back to the humility bit, it's nice to have a few records, but for me, doing something, to be the first to do something like, take the concept of a flying car and fly drive it across the Sahara Desert. I wasn't looking for a world record. I was just looking for a fantastic challenge and an amazing journey and a wonderful experience, which we got. And I think, maybe to answer your question, it's more about with something that's never been done before, you get to make up the rules. I think that's more interesting than following a set of boring guidelines like we did on Everest to get the highest dinner party. Guinness World Records, 3 pages of rules. You've got to have a chair with a back on it. You've got to drink alcohol. I mean, anyone who climbs Everest knows that the last thing you should be doing at 23,000 feet on the side of Mount Everest is drinking alcohol with your dinner. I mean, so ridiculous, really. But the point I'm making is that, with a first, it is fun. So what springs to mind, just to try and give you an example, is whilst we were on the second attempt, we got earthquaked in 2015, attempting the highest dinner party in the world. I went back 3 years later in 2018, April, May, and we did set the record, and we sat down for our 3-course dinner, and it was a Guinness World Record. And yes, we ate and drank alcohol at 23,000 feet. I admit it. But in order to get the Guinness World Record, we needed to do that to appease the sponsors and to raise the 100 grand we did for charity. All of that's great. But you know, the one thing that I enjoyed more than anything else was when we were sat at base camp a few days before, and my team were a little bit lethargic, couple of people suffering from altitude sickness, and you know, the mood was just a little bit damp, if you know what I mean. And so I said, okay, the next morning I'm going to arrange a game. I need you to all be out at 11 o'clock outside my tent. And they duly traipsed out the following morning, and I put them into 2 teams, and I created a little bit of a, you know, start line and then a finish line, and they were all really confused. We had Sherpas in there, we had Shapanis, we had Americans, Brits, males, females, young and old, and they were all intrigued as to what was going to happen. I put a spoon in each of the front 2 people's hands, placed an egg on each of the spoons, and blew a whistle and said, "Go, egg and spoon race relay, off you go." And we had half an hour of the most hilarious fun, you know, trying to win an egg and spoon race at the highest altitude ever to have an egg and spoon race. A lot of fun, no world records, although I told everybody it was a world record to motivate them. But do you know what I mean? It was just something that had never been done or thought to do, but at that moment was the right thing to do for the team and the morale.
Yeah. In fact, there's 2 things that spring to my mind. So one is we all need a purpose. So I think to start with the end in mind, even your cast adventure story, and even I guess summiting Everest, to have that goal that everyone can rally around, gets you out of bed in the morning. The what if question, actually, last week we interviewed Sally Gunnell, Olympic gold champion for 400-meter hurdles. And in fact, she's won 4 titles, the Commonwealth, the European and the World Games. And she was saying that 70% of her success was attributed to mental. It's all mental. And the preparedness that she went through is that she went through every eventuality. If she hit a hurdle, she'd already anticipated a lot of the things that could have gone wrong. And I think that, you know, just again, we're hearing it from you. It's this mindset. But yeah, we all need a purpose. And the preparedness thing is kind of interesting. In fact, on the habits, can you talk a little bit about the habits that you've developed? You talked about getting up early. So your military training kind of instilled that in you. Are there any good habits that you continue to this day that you could talk to our listeners about?
Okay, so probably number one, and I'll try and make this esoteric, and so number one would be at least once a day, get out, turn your screens off, and go and get some fresh air. Do a walk, you know, do a little bit of exercise, something that you can expand your lungs and get out of the artificial environment of an office, home, or doghouse or Mongolian yurt, Harry. Number two, from a business perspective and making your way in the world, whether you're employed or self-employed or whatever, I would say go to 2 networking, selling, marketing opportunities a month. So what's number 3? Yeah, okay. So every year, do 3 challenging things. So, for example, one of my 3, if I'm using my own analogy, on Sunday, I will be with a couple of mates attempting to ride the Century on the penny farthing bike. Never done it before. It's going to be painful, but we've raised a few quid for a local charity. A good friend of mine at our end destination in Bournemouth is so impressed that he's persuaded a hotelier to give us 5-star rooms and a 3-star meal when we get there. So there's the motivation, there's the incentive, there's the challenge, there's the opportunity. Things will come out of it, new contacts, new opportunities, and hopefully I shall lose a little bit of weight to boot.
Some great advice. Actually, I'm going to be not quite to the level, but I'm going to be chucking myself out of a plane once lockdown is over for the first time skydiving. It's one of those things that I've wanted to do for ages. I think getting up there is going to be a little bit scary, but once I do chuck myself out, I think it'll be pretty good.
Good for you, Harry. Well done. I won't tell you about my various canopy collapses. And,
yeah, best not.
I did a free fall once, and the parachute didn't open.
Right. Well, I hope mine does.
So do I.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, me
Thank
too.
You're too young for us to lose you.
No, but it should be good. I'm looking forward to it.
Don't let me put you off, honestly.
No, I'm doing
pulling
it.
your leg.
I'm doing it.
You get in there.
So I have a question. So if you were to leave one piece of advice for our listeners, just from your life experience, what would that be?
So I have three kind of core principles. The first is discovery. It's about lifelong learning, as you've indicated earlier. So never think that you're however old or grey haired you are that you can't learn something. So number one for me would be discovery. Number two is the old-fashioned teamwork. It's just I've never done anything in my life solo or on my own. I've always had stakeholders, partners, shareholders, expedition team members. Makes life so much more fun, interesting, and entertaining. And but you do need to work collaboratively with others. So I think concentrating on trying to be a good team player. And then the third is adventure, and we've been speaking quite a lot. Nothing about any of my business experiences at all. It's all been adventure stuff and mindset. But there we are. Maybe another time. For me, being adventurous is really important, James. And that includes having a bit of fun, understanding where your purpose lies, and then following that path wherever it may lead. And if you're adventurous, then you will find interesting journeys for your life.
Okay, that's brilliant. Excellent advice. In fact, I'm hoping to next year organise a little adventure motorcycle trip to Morocco. And I'm getting together a bunch of really eclectic entrepreneurs and investors and just interesting people, to be honest. The people that you want to sit around the campfire with. I don't know whether you're into motorbikes, but I think an entrepreneur friend of mine in the US, he knows a guy that has a bunch of KTMs. But anyway, that's next year's adventure. And so if you're up for something like that, then you'd be very welcome.
That's brilliant. No, I definitely am. Not only that, I'm sat in my home office. Underneath me is the garage, and right underneath me is my KTM 450 cc off-road motorbike that was bought in North Morocco when I was doing a similar journey a few years ago.
Oh, fantastic.
I can tell you, spend a week in the North Moroccan Sahara Desert is amazing. And yes, I'll definitely come again. And let me know when.
I will do. Well, I've got my 1200 Adventure BMW outside, which I think I might take it out for a little blast later. So kindred spirits. Brilliant.
We'll have to get Neil back on the podcast to discuss a bit more about business because, like you say, we've touched a lot on adventure today, but we'll have to get you on for the series 2 to go into all about Laughton & Co and all that sort of thing. But I am afraid that is all we have got time for today. Could you finally, for our audience, just tell us a little bit maybe about social media? Where can people follow your journey? Twitter, Facebook, that sort of thing, website?
Just type in my name, Neil Laughton, LAU, and you can find me on all the various channels. And the website is laughton.co.
Brilliant. Well, Neil, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on Rocket Pod today.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a great pleasure, and best of luck with it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Rocket Pod. Join us next week as we chat to Sharon Davies, the Chief Executive of Young Enterprise. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you could jump over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a quick review. We love reading your messages and thoughts about the episodes, and it helps us get exposure and sharing more of these inspiring stories with our listeners. Of course, thank you to our awesome sponsor, Flexi, who is the mecca for all your subscriptions. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next time.